Welcome to Learn It, a series of digital scrapbooking tutorials by Studio Wendy at Scrapbook Graphics. Today I wanted to show you how to use the new and improved version of the original cluster set of actions. You'll see here in the palette that there are 4 different cluster actions that create a slightly different style of cluster, and you'll see that we have a hide shadows action. And I'm going to run through each one of these rather quickly to show you how it works. The first thing that you should do is pull up the PDF cheat sheet that comes with your download, and that's going to show you a list of supplies for each of the different styles of clusters so you can prepare it in advance. And it will also show you a visual sample of what the final cluster should look like so that you have an idea when you are rotating and placing the elements as you go what you're going to end up with. What I suggest that you do is take a look at that list and then create a folder for each cluster you want to make and prepare in advance the files that you plan to use. You can throw a few extras in the file folder if you're not entirely sure what you want to use, but having a folder of possible choices that are narrowed down will make the process go a little bit quicker. So after you have loaded the actions into Photoshop or Photoshop Elements, you want to just select the first one and press play. In Elements, you would press apply and have to have a new document open before you begin. The first thing you'll see is the list of items that you will need in order for that particular action. So for cluster at 1, we see here that we need a frame, a journaler, a glitter or element spray, a dangling element or foliage, 1 fastener, and 1 small element. And then we're going to press continue. The action is going to come up and ask for an item. We are going to go ahead and select that item that we have chosen and press OK. Then we're going to be given a canvas here to resize our element on. And for the most part, you want to resize your element to fill out as much of the screen as entirely possible. You can go slightly over the edge if you need to, up to about 15 or 20% over the edge of the canvas, so that you can fill it up as best possible. And if you need to rotate it on that canvas as you do it, you can do that as well. And we're just going to continue on as it asks us for items. And you'll see here in this case, it actually would fill the screen better if we rotated it 90 degrees. So we're going to do that. And the action will continue on rotating and asking for elements so that we can select them, size them to fit the box that's provided, and then commit the changes on the next screen. You'll see here on my Mac, I can just scroll through and pick an item. Now, if I choose to, when I place an item onto the small canvas that I'm provided, I can allow it to crop it as well. But for the most part, you're probably going to want to get most of that element right onto the canvas. We don't need to get the item perfectly centered or anything, just fill up as much of the canvas as possible. When it's placed onto our larger cluster canvas, we can rotate, resize, and reposition the item a little bit more as well. But the way that this method works, it should position and place each item in a relatively proper placement for the cluster that it's designed to match. So we're just going to sit here and watch now as this particular action finishes running, as we select each element and place it on the cluster. So you'll see that cluster 1 is now complete, and we can adjust any of the layers as we see fit, moving things forward or backward, adjusting our shadows, and adjusting the placement of anything that might need to be tweaked, as all the layers are left completely intact as layers. And now we can move on to the second action in the set, and we're just going to watch again as we go through and open each item that's requested, placing it on the canvas, resizing it, and accepting the placement on the main canvas. At this point in this particular action, you're going to be asked for a ribbon or ribbon wrap to wrap around the frame. And I wanted to point out here, I wanted to show you how it's going to be clipped to the frame. Because when you position it, you're going to want to make sure you avoid the opening of the frame, or you'll see here it is going to get clipped in a really strange way. So make sure once that is placed onto the canvas that you resize it down far enough that you're avoiding the opening of the frame or the top and bottom edges of the frame. You only really want it clipped to the left and the right. And if the element you choose doesn't look good clipped, that's okay. Just continue on with the action, allow it to be clipped. You can unclip it and reposition it later. The same thing with the object you're going to tuck under the frame. You want to be sure that when you size it and position it and tuck it under the ribbon wrap that you are avoiding the area of the frame that might be clipped. And again, you can unclip it later if the element you choose is not suitable for clipping underneath that frame. And that's it for the second cluster. Let's take a look at the third. With this third cluster, the one thing I wanted to mention was that several times you'll be requested to choose an element that will be used more than once on the cluster. So you'll see that when you have the element placed and positioned the first time and press enter, it will pop up again on your screen in another location where you can tweak that position and placement as well. It will do this with the first element that you position, as well as with some of the flower objects that it asks for as well. And some of the other actions will do that too, but it usually will tell you in the description right beforehand to choose an element that will be placed on your canvas several times. So just be on the lookout for that. So that's a look at the third cluster. Let's move on to the fourth one. This fourth cluster is actually my favorite cluster because it's perfect for creating a multi-layered embellishment to include in various spots on your page. It's really perfect for adding foliage and flowers and mixing them together, along with like a ribbon or even a glitter spray or stamp behind it. So I really love using this one to add a complete full layered cluster to a portion of the layout. We're going to take a look next at the Hide Shadows action. This action is specifically meant for designers who are creating these clusters to include in their kits. What it does is takes all of your elements and adds a layer mask to hide the outer shadows so that the only remaining shadows are left in areas where elements overlap each other. And this is so that customers can add their own preferred shadow settings to the entire cluster. And all you have to do is have your layered file open and select the Hide Shadows action and press play. And you'll see when you do that, the action is going to go through very quickly, create a group out of your elements, and create a layer mask over top of it. And then when you zoom in, you'll see here as I turn the shadow or the layer mask on and off that you can see the areas outside of the element have been shadowed. The shadow has been removed, and I put a white background here behind it so that you can see it a little better. When I turn on the layer mask, the shadow in the exterior portions only disappears, but the shadow on the interior portions where elements touch each other and overlap remains. So that's all that the Hide Shadows action is doing. And now this element would be, or this cluster would be ready to save as a PNG file and add to your kit. And of course, make sure you turn off that white layer if you put it in there to take a look at it. So after I finished the recording and this action set, I realized that we had one little serious minor problem with the clusters here. You'll see here that we have a bunch of elements that are showing inside the picture area of the frame. Now, if we are using this cluster as a scrapper and we want to just place our photo behind here, that works perfectly fine because our photo will end up hiding these extra little bits and pieces that are in the center of the frames. But if we want to create these clusters to give away or to sell, we need to remove these sections of the cluster elements so that they will not show up on top of the customer's picture. So what we ended up doing is adding 3 new little actions. We have here knockout 1, knockout 2, and knockout 3. Notice we don't have a knockout 4, and that's because cluster number 4 doesn't use a frame. It doesn't have anything that needs to be hidden. So there's no knockout action for that one. Now, I have open up here a cluster that I've made with the Studio Girls' newest collaborative kit, Indian Summer. And I am going to show you how these knockout actions work. So this is cluster 2. I'm going to click on the knockout number 2 action and press play. We get a message that on the next screen we need to resize the box to hide that center frame area. So you'll see here pops up the box. We can just grab these corners and drag them around. We can rotate by clicking outside to get it right where we want it. It doesn't need to be exact, it just needs to loosely fall within that center frame area. And when you're done, press enter. Then you'll be prompted to do that for the second frame here. And again, it can be really loose and dirty, and press enter. And we get a message now that that cluster is complete. If we want to run the Hide Shadows action, we can do that now. So press continue. Now this works beautifully in Photoshop because you're left with a layer here that you can turn on and off and hide those elements. And you can even move some of those elements around and resize them if you want. And you'll see here, even if I make this flower super big and put it back there, I end up not seeing it. Unfortunately, this method doesn't work as well in Photoshop Elements, so we needed to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to pop over there and demonstrate the same action and how you use it in Photoshop Elements. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop Elements. I have the same exact cluster open, and I have the actions loaded here into my actions palette. So in this case, I'm going to select the knockout 2 action, and that's over here, to knockout, and press apply. I'm going to get a message like we did before that we need to resize these white boxes to fit behind the frame area. You'll notice too here that in Elements, this action is actually duplicating the file, and that's because we will be employing a destructive method of removing these inner pieces. So let's just get our boxes sized here and press enter. And once we're done with that, this action is going to go through and it's actually going to delete the pieces that are hidden off of the layers themselves. And you'll see here we get a message that the cluster is complete. Now, if we want to, first let me show you how it deleted these elements. Here is our leaf up here, and I'm going to show just that layer. You'll see now it's cut off. It has been deleted where it's hidden behind that frame. So in the future, if we wanted to say move this leaf over here, we've deleted it, we've erased that piece. We want to go back to our original document, make the changes, and then run this action again to knock out these center pieces of the elements. So that's why it's destructive. It's actually deleting the pixels off of those individual elements to do that. Now say we added another flower, or let's see, say we take this tree and we want to put a copy of it behind here. We want to put another copy of it behind here, but we don't want that showing up in that frame. What we can do is still use this knockout layer that's been created. It's still here and it's hidden. We can make our selection, then go down to the flower copy and press the delete key to get rid of it there. So that's how this action works a little bit differently in Photoshop Elements. Now, once we've done this and gone through this step of doing the knockout process, now we can do the hide shadows process. And we just click that, press apply, press OK for the fill. We get our clipper layer here, and now we can go ahead and clip all of these layers to our clipper layer to hide those shadows, and everything works perfectly just as we would expect it to. So that is how this works here, and now you have a better way of getting rid of those little pieces in the middle so that you can share these clusters, sell them, share them, whatever, with your customers, and you won't have those little bits on top of their photos. So that is Cluster It version 1, revamped, revised in the new method that does a better job of emulating the actual cluster that it was built around. And I hope you enjoyed this action, and thank you for watching this episode of Learn It.